Hello, everybody. Thanks everyone for watching, who's tuning in now or later. I'm excited to be here with Brian and Mary and Meredith. This is our Reclaim TV case study bonanza, and part of a thing we're doing this month called Reclaim Rewind, trying to look back on the year of what we've been doing on Reclaim TV, what other folks have been doing exciting projects and work like that, kind of re-highlighting this type of stuff. So um, I don't know, Meredith, you can kind of kick it off, and then we'll chat with our guests here.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are simulcasting both on Reclaim TV and DS106 Radio, Reclaim Radio, as we rewind 2024 and celebrate the community and all things that we've done this year and just all that fun sort of stuff. So we've got some. This is the week 2 of the rewind as well. So last week, you can catch up on archive.reclaim.tv. We had the whole Reclaim hosting team on to recap our year and what we've been working on internally and externally through conference visits, other projects, things like that. So it's definitely worth a watch. To catch up on all things Reclaim hosting. And then today we've got the case studies. We're joined with Mary and Brian to talk over some of that super fun stuff. And then just quick looking forward to next week. We've got our community chat rewind that Taylor and the team are hosting to look through the previous community chats and have some more voices in store for that one. So we've got those there as well. But this week we've got the case study, so I'll pass it back to Mary and Brian to introduce yourselves, and we'll get into it.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Mary Isbell. I was one of the case studies, I guess, this fall semester, and I'm happy to chat more today. What I was sharing then was how I've worked with Reclaim to have Open Lab established at my university, at the University of New Haven. And what I recounted then was kind of all the way back 10 years to when I started to try to get WordPress available to instructors at my university, and walked through the journey of finding Reclaim and eventually moving into more support from Reclaim, which has been lovely. So I am, happy to talk about those things, but also what I didn't talk about in that moment, because I was looking back, was the current project, which is also very much like enabled and facilitated by Reclaim, which is building a student kind of directed reading experience. So instead of having a reading list determined by an instructor, letting students determine what they're going to read during the semester, and realizing that we can build a database of reading experiences using WordPress, and that it's just become this really exciting thing we're getting off the ground. And when I first started, I didn't realize that WordPress could facilitate that, and it's actually helping a lot. So it keeps being the case that having Open Lab at our university, having access to that easily and letting other instructors easily access that, is helping me imagine new pedagogical possibilities and sort of see the tools at my disposal to make that happen, with just a few questions to people who know more things about things than I do, right?
Awesome. Yeah, and we're excited to have you here. Like I said, we'll chat. We'll give a recap for folks who haven't seen that about what we chatted about, and I'm excited to hear a little bit more about that project. So, and Brian, we're so glad you can join us again. It's always a pleasure when you're on Reclaim TV. So.
Yeah, listen, thanks. It's good to be amongst the crew. Yeah, my name's Brian Mathers from Visual Thinkery, and I've been working with Reclaim for a long time now on the visual aesthetic, I guess. So as each project has come along, or each product has come along, we've got together, we've talked about it, and then I've tried to dissect that conversation and turn it into bits of art, I guess. And which is what I seem to do for a living these days, is taking that conversation and turn it into pixels that mean things. So, and I the Reclaim team are one of my favorite teams, I think, because not only am I find it very easy to get good stuff out of them to draw pictures, but I'm also a customer, so I have the various sites that I've got hosted, so I sort of taste a bit of the action too, which is great. So I'm a big fan of the services there as well. So yeah, it's great to be here.
Awesome, thank you. So I know we have a time limitation. You know, the idea on Mary. So we're gonna kind of focus on what you've been working through first. But the idea for this session in general, and Meredith kind of said as much, but we've been trying to make more of an effort this year to specifically highlight, I think, cool things that are happening with folks who are hosting with us that we can share back and folks might find useful, as we call them case studies, but the idea being, we always get the question in kind of any avenue that we use to communicate with people, whether that's like support tickets or the forums or like Discord or just at conferences. We always go like, hey, I'm doing this and this. Do you know anyone who is trying to do X, Y, or Z? We get that question constantly. And it's sometimes harder for us to answer because it's complicated. We do work with a decent amount of people. We're a small team, but B, we're not always sure if it's ours to share, because they're usually not our projects. So we've been trying to build up more of a encouraging folks, say, hey, this is a cool thing, would you come talk to us about it? And really, this is just more of that. We really wanted to kind of look back at some of the things we've done, some of the case studies we've done this year, bring them back to the attention, because we do these streams basically every week, so it's really easy to miss them. So we thought, why don't we kind of capitalize on that and try and bring these back to folks who probably haven't caught them yet. So thank you both for coming. So I'm excited to get more into that. So Mary, could you give like a little, I guess elevator pitch version? I don't know about elevator pitch. We have more time than that. But we chatted about Open Lab, and can you tell us here sort of what are you all using Open Lab for? What even is Open Lab for?
Right.
Because that's kind of mostly what we talked about.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So, yes, it was. And, Open Lab designed at CUNY. And so that I learned about it because I was looking into WordPress multi-sites, and I found that Open Lab existed. This is definitely one of those projects when people ask you, are people doing X? This is one where please look at what everyone who has Open Lab installed is doing. And there's abundant resources on it. There's a really great community forum that is actually using Open Lab, and that you can kind of post your questions from different institutions who are using it, of the kind of core team at CUNY, which is a wonderfully helpful resource when you're at it. And I think other people, I learned basically through our conversation that it's not just me out here saying, I would love our university to make WordPress available to students and faculty, but there are many instructors at other universities who might be in that situation. I'm not as radical in trying to do this as I kind of maybe thought. I was alone in it. I think if you have a little bit of understanding of how websites need to be hosted, then you have enough knowledge to get that process started. That's the big kind of thing I learned along the way, is that I didn't have to understand everything. The tool is open source, and the developers of the tool are happy to answer your questions. And Reclaim Hosting has sort of pricing options that allow you to get started and then kind of grow, and they can help you. And so I'm never in a position which I feared I would be in, which is, oh God, something's happening with someone's website in another class than mine, and I just started this and I'm not IT, right? Like, I don't know how to fix this. That hasn't been the case. So the big thing that I would say, I didn't probably mention before, but what I would want everyone to know is that the idea of establishing a multi-site or an Open Lab instance for your campus can seem a little overwhelming when you realize that you want to think through, what are your policies going to be for how you handle content that goes on different websites? How are you going to manage and structure your site? How are you going to help people learn how to use your site when they don't already know? And if you're doing this bootstrapping it kind of the way I was, you're not necessarily going to always be available when someone has a question. So how are you going to anticipate some of those questions? One of the most amazing, aspects of Open Lab is that all of the content on these sites is, for the most part, openly licensed, which means I worked with some members of the team at CUNY, and our IT actually paid them a bit to do this work, but I could have done it myself if I had the time, just a little bit more time. But you can take essentially that openly licensed help page and transform it for your university. You don't have to build it from scratch. And so we could get up and running a lot easier than I kind of imagined that we would. I just did it without a ton of help support at first, because I also didn't think that a lot of faculty were going to like flock to Open Lab the second it was created. And that was actually the case. It's more like individual faculty members learn about it. We had a fellowship that was grant funded, so that was a cohort of faculty who learned. But then now I'm hearing about individual faculty members who learn about it, go there, look at the help resources, and are using it, and they never reached out to me at all. And so I just want to emphasize that to people who are listening, that if your university doesn't currently make it possible for students to create in the open, this is the key thing pedagogically that I think a lot of universities don't have, is they might have a learning management system and their students might be turning in papers. And if they do a project with their students, they might be going to Squarespace, or they might be going to some other website to do a one-off website with their class, and running into any number of issues, including that students accidentally overwrite each other's content when they're not in a system that allows individual authors to contribute to a collaboratively built website. So when you're in that situation, know that there's a few steps you can take to make something else available to your students for your own classes, but then it becomes, I don't know, just kind of can grow really easily there.
Is this the page, the help page
Yeah.
you're talking about?
And Bree helped us use that, but essentially it was developed first at CUNY.
Sure. I love the way you kind of put that. Well, there's kind of two things I wanted to pick out of there specifically. It is exciting. I think I said the same thing at the case study too, but so I'll say it again. It is really exciting when whatever project you're working on starts to have a life outside of just you, right?
Yeah.
When you're not the one, because starting things like this, resources like this, sites that a community can use, the nature of it is you are hands-on for all of the first people using it, or at least that's my experience. And so it's really exciting the first time you find, I didn't even know that person was using this thing. That's when you know that it's got some momentum, in my opinion. So that's really exciting. The other thing I wanted to kind of to highlight from what you just said too, or maybe build on, I guess, is the idea that many universities may not have an open space like this, and I would say that most don't, in the sense that, or it's easy to overlook the fact that like an IT department doesn't necessarily have expertise in most of them, certainly not like open pedagogy and why that would matter and why you might care about it. That sometimes there are folks situated there that understand those things. But IT departments aren't even necessarily experts at web hosting. A lot of times they're, really focused on the internal services, and the web hosting stuff can be done from other companies or whatever. So it's very common. A thing we hear really commonly is someone will go, "Hey, I want to run this application, but my IT wasn't able to help us with it." And I mean, like, trust me, I most of my experience is the flip side of that, like working in IT in higher ed and being the one to be like, I'm sorry, like that's just not a thing that we do. Like, so, it's important to note that I can't say that strongly enough, that just because you want to do something and your internal IT is not able to support it doesn't mean that you can't or shouldn't do it. There are other resources. There are hosting companies like us. You know, we hope you pick us, but there are hosting companies like this. This is not you have to do it on your own. Or the frequent dichotomy we see people make is, I can't use this open source thing because this one person won't support it for me, so I have to go with completely proprietary lockdown thing. And no, you have a lot of choices in between.
Absolutely. And it is actually more often the case at my university that people don't even know about the open options. And so if there's that glimmer of like knowledge, or you've heard something about it, I want more people to know. I will share like a repeat kind of what I talked through, but just to emphasize that when I arrived at the university, I said, I want to be able to make WordPress sites with my students, and they established cPanel for me, and they gave me the reins, but it wasn't a multi-site, and I would have had to create new iterations for each faculty member who wanted to use it. When I realized that Open Lab existed, I started to, okay, how's this going to work? And Reclaim was the first place I went. And all I had to do was go to my same IT folks who had established the cPanel and say, if you can work into your budget this, I think it was $100 a year, right? Can you just let us play? And can you approve this? And it, like, I remember thinking that was such a hard, like, that I had to work really hard to sell them on allowing this, but it was the easiest thing in the world for them to do. And they just said, go ahead. They were only concerned was that it was going to explode and they were going to need to support it at a high level. And I think you could see from other people, but my experience has certainly been that you have to make an effort to get more people to use it beyond that sort of original or initial, I would say, interest of your immediate colleagues who share your pedagogical goals, right, of open education, which is just not going to be a ton of people at first. And you could think about the folks at CUNY who have, you know, an entire structure meant to support bringing new faculty on board all the time to grow that kind of program. All that is to say, I don't think that you're that if the IT team is concerned that they're suddenly going to need to support something beyond their capacity, can put their minds at ease. That didn't wind up happening. And then they just let me do it. And then I had at my disposal all of the wonderful support team that know about this technology, instead of trying to make it happen where I wasn't comfortable and where even the people doing it for me weren't comfortable.
Yeah, and there's a lot of ways to meet your support folks halfway on that too, right? Like in your case, you're able to make that the ask. But there are simple things you can do too, and say, hey, we're going to put a cap. We only, if I have more than 8 faculty members asked to use it for classes, then we're going to say that's all we can handle this at this time. Like there are ways, simple ways, even non-technical policy way, just this is what we say, kind of ways. But you're right. I've very rarely seen that happen. And I think Meredith and I have seen enough of these things start. That's almost never the case. Okay. Usually the bigger risk in my experience is that people are so concerned that they put so restrictive rules on it that it never takes off, and then they have to discontinue the service because nobody's using it. So that's more often the big risk. But I can't also sit confidently and say, well, that could never happen. Of course,
right.
Certainly
I like your idea. I like your idea. And I would say that other things I was concerned about were like, if it has the university name on it, and this is not something the university does, it does not put its name on things that students can just publish, at will. How do we put some kind of policy in place to address content that might be not something the university would want up? And I thought through those things and talked with folks about it, and it just never became an issue. But again, it's the individual instructor controlling how their site is public or private, and it's fairly simple to take something and turn it private as you adjudicate a situation. So those are things that are involved in the open community no matter what. And I guess the right way to think about that is that you want the faculty who are experimenting in this area to have a good community to reach out to whenever they're unsure of how to navigate their students moving into the open environment.
Awesome.
I feel like I brought up a thing that's like kind of sticky and never was sticky for me, but it was a thing I was worried about.
it's a common thing you hear too, and you know, uh, the content stuff is hard, but it's also hard, or I'm sorry, I should say easy to forget that you actually have a lot of affordances and resources available to you when you're doing this particular thing, which is working with students to create content in a higher ed setting. You have actual, in many cases, literal legal experts you can talk to that maybe aren't super available to you, but are available in the worst of cases. But it's important to remember that, like, that is for the you know, the worst case scenarios, and like you said, you have controls that you can use to give you time to make decisions, to work with a student. This is a great time for them to learn about these things. I kind of love these situations because it's sure a better way to learn about this than, like, you know, academic like you know, like in an academic I'm forgetting
Integrity.
the word. What?
Integrity,
Sorry.
like
Yeah,
an
in
academic
integrity situations,
Yeah.
way worse for the student to deal with usually.
Yeah.
So that's kind of good, but also, you know, there's also playing in this space can be hard because there's so much written stuff about, like, what schools need to comply with and do this and that, but it's often not geared towards teaching scenarios. It's geared towards external, you know, what does a school need to do to their main website to make sure that anyone who needs to access it can access it. For that's not really the same thing as we have a site that we're using to teach a class, and it's for my students in here. And it's really common. People will say, well, we need to comply with this, and that, and so we can't do it. And I go, you need to look at it more like course content, and you follow those rules. And even that's not the same thing if it's the student making it and for their own consumption. You know, it's a it's tricky. But I guess my main advice is it's tricky, but it's usually way less scary than people think.
And productively tricky. Like, it's the kinds of questions that you want to be thinking about and talking about with your students. And I think every semester I'm surprised how powerful it is to have them first think of their digital presence currently, think about what's there, think about how much they want there, how they want to be present online if they want to be present. And then make that decision at the end of the semester. Will the work you did all semester be part of our site when it goes public? Make that choice at the end of the semester. Know that you can always come back and change your mind. You can always come back and edit your work. That's a real wonderful affordance of this structure. So I'll say one more thing before I have to run, which is that I'm also, like, as much as possible, trying to show our administration what Open Lab can do in terms of what is sometimes called e-portfolios, which essentially to me just means allowing students to establish a presence on the web that they can use as they seek employment, which is a different goal than open education yet a little, but it's just perfect for this use. And I feel like potentially if I can get the word out, I can kind of interrupt what might become a contract with a proprietary provider of an e-portfolio platform before it takes a ton of money from our university and gives students a subpar experience developing resumes for the web or developing personal websites for the web. So I'm thinking about that now. And if anyone hears this and wants to talk about how they're handling that too, happy to discuss it.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be, I mean, it's a perennial topic in a good way, and worth revisiting too, because I don't know that we can say enough that again, I think probably Meredith and I are biased, but this is the way to do that type of work with students and make it impactful for them, not just I made a thing because I was asked to and now it's gone because it was deleted or whatever. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'll go give my final now.
Yeah.
I'll watch the rest later. Brian, it was good to meet you.
Thank you so much for joining us while you could. All right. So thanks Brian too for letting us talk with Mary there at the start, and I appreciate you being here. So yeah, we want to kind of shift focus a little bit to, you've actually done quite a bit of artwork for us this year. And we've featured some of it already. Well, I mean, we're using it, of course, but we've talked about it, some of it already with you in relation to Reclaim Press. And but we've also been using more and more the Reclaim EDU artwork, which I don't think we've like formally recorded talking about necessarily. But we can touch on that too a little bit. But yeah, I mean, like, what's your year been like? I mean, I feel like it's time for reflection, and we have you here. So
no, I've had a good year in many ways, really. I have, I there's been parts of this year which have been quiet for the first time in a few years, and then there have been parts of this year more recently where I've been as busy as I've ever been, and I guess I'm reminded that that's the way the creative landscape is, and you've got to make most use of the quieter times to do all of those things that you're always why do I never have time to do that other stuff, so but yeah, I've got such a diverse range of projects on, I think, because no two clients are the same, and recently I find myself doing sort of so say a team have done a big research project, and then they want their findings to be more visual, and so I get to step into their world, and they're talking to me about their 3-year research program, and I'm trying to understand it and reflect back, sort of visual, usually cartoons, as a result. So and I'm always amazed at how interesting that is, because I'm not really in the academic world, but when someone's talking about something that they're passionate about, I get hooked in pretty quickly, I guess, and I start seeing things, and that helps conjure things up. So it's the same with Reclaim, really, in that you can tell that Reclaim people really care about the stuff that they do, because when you get them together to think about a thing, out comes some really useful little metaphors, and so like I really enjoyed doing the Reclaim Press work, and there's almost a little process there where by conjuring things up, you're able to look at what you're offering from a different angle, and it allows you to maybe say something that you wouldn't have said, or put something out that you wouldn't have put out. So so I always enjoy that sort of collaborative ping pong of, well, let's see where we can take this based on what you've told me, and then like a couple of months, 3 months pass, and then I see it coming back to me, but it has other words sculpted around it. And I really like that. I really like seeing it, how you guys then start to make sense of it as bits of art, and how you start to then put a narrative on top of that it was there at the start, but it was more bitty, you know what I mean? And now it's sort of more formed or something. So there's a bit of ping pong that goes on somehow. Yeah.
For sure. I think, one of the things that that I witness with this, the 1 or 2 times I've been like at part of the process of chatting with you on what, a project we're working on, and I know I've heard you describe it this way before. This is not anything new to someone who's familiar with your work, probably, but we come in and go like, hey, we have this thing. We're thinking this, and this. We want to visually represent it in this way. And you're like, hold on. Let's talk about the thing, right? Like, we need to start not just big picture, but as far back as you can go, of what are we doing? And in my experience, it's very difficult to meaningfully have those types of conversations in almost any work setting unless you're intentional about them, right? We're a small team, so maybe we have it easier than others in some cases, but it's really easy to not overlook it's really easy to skip past the why are we doing and what really part of things, especially in a work scenario. And what I think is kind of interesting is that sort of by necessity through your process that you encourage here, we get to that, right? Because I don't know if it's a limitation breeds creativity type thing of like we have this objective and we need to really understand it before we can move on, or if it's just we're trying to distill something. But both, it's really interesting to see how you can really get to the core of something by trying to figure out how you're going to relay that information to someone else. And in this case, we're talking about artwork, but it could be, it could be you're trying to make an elevator pitch or something like that. And what I think is even more interesting is usually, and I think Reclaim Press is a very good example of this happening. Most of the way we described Reclaim Press did not click until after we received artwork from you. We knew what this thing could do. We're like, hey, this is a platform for hosting WordPress sites, and it has these strengths. That's basically what we came in saying. And we chatted with you, and we talked about what we were excited about, what we were hoping to provide, and it really meaningfully shifted a lot of what we ended up talking about, which was sort of not just like value and technical stats or whatever, but more like, hey, this is a distilled experience. This is an experience that should make something that's important to you easy to use, but also rock solid. WordPress sites forever home. That's kind of one thing I'm thinking of. So I don't know. I guess I'm curious, if that's something you see often of like, hey, we had this conversation, I've made artwork, and then the client comes back to me and is like, yeah, we're actually describing this different based on the, I guess the way I'm saying it, it almost sounds like I'm saying that the cart's pulling the horse, but I'm really not. What I'm saying is that like through the process, we're really distilling something here.
Yeah, it's a puzzle, right? It's a puzzle, and you've already got the pieces. We've just got to sort of have a look at them, and then I try to put them together in different combinations, and then you recognize them when you see them. When you're like, okay, no, that's how it fits together. But you always had the pieces. You know what I mean? So it's so I'm taking what you're saying and trying to solve puzzles. And sometimes I make up my own little strange puzzle that doesn't get used, but you'll know it when you see it. And at least I'm banking on something resonating with you. But I'm not adding stuff that isn't there. I'm reflecting stuff that is there, and part of it's the benefit of having someone step into your world from outside. Like whenever back in my programming days, it always tickled me that we used to have this sort of rubber ducky type approach when we were sort of training young programmers who, they'd be banging their head off a wall for 2 hours trying to solve a particular problem. And then you'd be like, right, well, look, here's a rubber ducky. Explain to the rubber ducky what your problem is. And of course, as soon as they start to verbalize their problem, then they end up hearing their own words and solving the problem and go, oh, no, hold on a minute, there's an angle. And then they solve the problem. And all that they've done really is to try to explain to another being who's maybe not of the same world that they are in, and there's a real power in that, and I suppose the other power is listening, to being on the other side of that and be able to spot the little clues when they present themselves, and maybe that's my gift, you know what I mean, is that sort of listening and spotting. But yeah, there's some simple things in there that actually that you're not, as you've just said, you're not going to have those conversations internally because you all know your landscape internally. You know what I mean? You're fretting about the how. You're not thinking about the why, and I'm always pulling you back to the why are you doing this? Why? Whose problem are you trying to solve? You know what? Which is sort of fairly basic, but it gets to the essence of what it is that, for example, Reclaim Press is. You know, it's like, well, why are you doing this again? But and the good thing about what you do is that there is always purpose behind it. I think in the corporate world, you know, products are created that are purpose light. You know, they're there to make money primarily. Well, no, it's true. It's true. You know, so finding where that purpose is, because you're generally, you know, solving someone's problem, or someone has a need that you're then building something around, sure. And you know that makes it a whole lot easier, really, rather than the guys have come up with this solution, but we haven't found our problem yet. You know, which happens a lot. You know.
Yeah, I like to kind of describe that typically as we are privileged at Reclaim in the sense that we mostly get to focus on what creating things that we A, care about, and B, other people care about because they're telling us they care about it, right? And we're not normally just doing this because we have, like, you know, shareholders or something to appease. But you know, we do try to put ourselves in that position. That's kind of the long and the short of it. But it does make this process fun too. You know.
Yeah, if you were a big organization, the bigger you are, the harder it is to hear your customer. You know what I mean? So and if you're really small, then you can't move. You can't provide stuff that's solid enough to your customer. So there's a benefit in being that sort of right size in the middle, where you're small enough to be able to hear, listen, and you know, decide, actually we need to go in this direction, and you know, whatever else. But you can still provide stuff that's really solid. So yeah, I think that's one of your real strengths there.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I was gonna talk about a little bit the greetings from Reclaim. That's another good example of you kind of taking out like the day-to-day individual aspects of Reclaim and kind of giving us the bird's eye view piece of that. I'm gonna see if I can get the pictures up. Jim's blog post has them all, but the images were loading a little slowly for me, so I'll post it in the chat. But just kind of taking all of those pieces together to give us that bird's eye view of what Reclaim is. I think that was like a really excellent example of that as well.
Yeah, and again, there's a very particular lens we were looking through here, wasn't there? You know, of we're going to do a conference, and we don't want to be like slippery salespeople. You know what I mean? As in, we actually want to, if someone's interested, you know, how do you communicate stuff and let people explore themselves? You know, which is, I think, the best sort of sales, isn't it? You know, where it's non-threatening. You're not trying to sell anybody anything really. The idea of creating postcards I just really loved that. You know, the idea that you could have a conversation, but you could leave someone with a postcard. You could scribble something on the back of it. You know, and also there's so much artwork that we could reuse in that. You know, to represent those things. So again, it's like a meta puzzle that we were solving there. You know, where we're putting those sort of pieces together for that sort of higher level interaction, I guess. And I think as well, rule number one of reaching out to any sort of new customer is it's got to feel different, you know. And Reclaim's got so much stuff that feels different that it should be easy, you know. Yeah.
I'll say it was a lot of fun. So I was at Open Ed 24, and Pilot and I each had a stack of these that we had available to give to people, and it was so much fun because there was a few cases where we had folks who, you know, we had never talked with at all, hadn't heard of the company, and they're like, "Oh, do you have like a business card?" And I was like, "We don't have business cards. We have postcards." And the absolute delight, like when I pull the stack out and they'd be like, oh my God. And then, because it wasn't normally like, can I have one of those? It was like, can I look at all of them and decide which design I want? And then I'd be like, yeah, you can take two, or whatever, So that was delightful, because I think it touched on kind of every angle we could have wanted there, and that it kind of showed us, it got to help us talk about like the personality of the company a little bit, and maybe not literally with words in this case, right? But demonstrate, I guess, is the word I'm looking for. It was something different, and I kind of like that. Like, I'm gonna give you this thing, and if you have 4 other business cards, this one's not gonna look the same in your bag. You're not gonna mistake this one for the others. And yeah, to being able to write on the back of them, which is such a small thing. People do or not. It's not a small thing. It seems like it would be a small thing, but people do that all the time, of course, with business cards, but it's not much you can write there. There were some cases where I left folks a small outline where they described to me a small project that they wanted to do, and I'd be like, here's what you want. You want this and this and this. My name's Taylor. Here's your postcard. It was awesome.
Brilliant. Oh, I'm delighted to hear that. Yeah, I've used postcards a few times even in my own work. So, I've made lots of sort of zines about the place that I grew up in Ulster in Ireland, and I've created loads of postcards with cartoons on the front, and so if anybody. If I'm sending zines out, or if anybody buys a zine in my zine shop, you know what I mean? I write a little note in the postcard and sort of send it to them, and it just feels different, right? There's something about that feeling, that people will remember how you made them feel. Somebody clever once said, who was it? I can't even remember. I can't remember the person who said that. Anyway, it's very clever, and therefore. Creating an interaction that has those good vibes, I guess, is important. But I think the thing is that that's who you are. You're not trying to fabricate a sort of how do we have more interactions with people, but it's just letting you be you. As a company, in terms of what you believe and how you believe you should treat your customer, and the sort of things that you offer and why you offer them. I think that's the key to it working. It's genuine.
Yeah, I mean and that's kind of why I eventually landed on the word demonstrate, right? Because I do mean that of like, we talk to people differently at these conferences, I think, than most companies do. In many cases, we're more interested in learning about them, than anything. And so to have this as a thing, and be like, oh yeah, we're a small company, we do these things, we're very focused on this particular thing. And then to be able to kind of back that up with, and this is how we're introducing ourselves on paper today, on literal paper today.
Yeah.
I think it meant a lot. And it's even, I would say, as someone who that was my first conference, that was of that size where I was representing Reclaim in person. Ever, because I've been at the company a couple years, but most of my conference type stuff was either very small conferences or online conferences. So it was even great as like as kind of an ice breaking tool for me. So that was really cool.
And actually that doing something different as ice breaking is really useful, isn't it? Because like in a previous life when I ran a software company, I used to have to go to the odd sort of conference, the odd show like this, and oh my goodness, I just hated it so much. Just because you catch someone's eye and they'd look at you going, you're just like all of those other companies there, and I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to be sold anything. You know what I mean? It was just so awkward. And anyway, I didn't know enough then, I guess, to sort of know that, look, you've got to do something different, and you've got to let people come to you when they see that you are doing something different. And
Mhm.
because all I ever wanted was a conversation about, well, you're interested in that, well, here's what we do. That's
Yeah.
as simple as that. I don't need to sell you anything. I just need to just have a conversation. So but yeah, the postcard as a vehicle, I think it's just so powerful anyway. So I'm glad it fitted so well. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the other things with that I would encourage, if anyone takes this and is looking for postcard related advice, is make sure you have more than one design. I think that was very important for us too, because it was really a lot of fun to let folks pick, and in some cases even useful for me to learn a little bit about them. Like I had some people who were like, oh, I really want the specific like 4 square like Andy Warhol inspired vinyl one. Like that's cool.
Oh yeah.
And that was that, but it's just like a little thing that I've learned about that person, and that I can use to make that conversation possibly more meaningful to them. But of course ours are sort of focused mostly around like, well, we had a mixture, a sort of general, this is Reclaim ones, and some sort of product focused things. This is a particular thing, Reclaim Cloud. That was really, I think, really useful part of this. So if anyone does that, get a couple, even if you don't have like specific, product artwork or anything. Have a couple variants. That was a useful part of this for me. So
yeah, well, choice is important. I think that's a different.
Sure.
It's a different interaction when choice is involved. But also, I think I learned a long time ago that that people don't see the same things. You know what I mean? When you create a cartoon or you create a bit of art, nobody sees it the same way. They all bring their experience to it. And so one person can look at the thing you've created and go, yeah, well, and another person go, oh, I really love that. I'd love to see that on my fridge, and everything in between. So by letting somebody choose and seeing what resonates with them because it's visual, as in, yeah, that's always going to produce different results for different people. So I think that's a powerful interaction, and potentially a memorable one, which is what you want, I think. But yeah. Here we are deconstructing marketing techniques,
Yeah. Well, and it's, I don't know. I find these conversations really, I think they're interesting inherently, personally, but I even find them valuable to me as, like someone, and I think probably just about anyone that works at Reclaim, possibly folks working with us, in higher ed, because there's this type of thing always sort of connects, the type of thing we do around teaching and learning, and what we know about how people learn things and how people communicate, and the work I'm doing day to day, right, which is helping folks understand these tools and what they can do for them. I don't know, I always find that valuable, and I think that when you do again get down to the distilling things down of why, there's only a couple of reasons why anybody does anything in a lot in work or places like this, and it is useful, I think, to sometimes get yourself encouraged to think in that way, and there's a lot you can learn from looking at your practice, and that I can apply to my own, right? So I'm thinking of already, just through this conversation, I'm thinking of like a big thing that, say, Meredith and I do is help folks try and understand what different things can do for them that we offer, or in some cases that we don't offer, that we have some experience with. And again, is this important reminder that even if someone is expressing that like time is of the issue, or maybe they know, maybe they're an expert in the space, it's still valuable to get down to the why, because it's you can get to more creative solutions that almost every single time. and
Yeah.
those solutions may be better.
Yeah, I think coupled with that, there's Einstein's thing about being the curious idiot. And quite often when I'm working with a client, I will announce that at the start of a call, where it's just like, look, I get to play the curious idiot here. And really, I'm giving myself permission to ask obvious questions. Because I think whenever we're in a conversation and there's we don't want to look as if we don't know what we're talking about. You know what I mean? We want to be asking intelligent, clever questions, but there's so much to be gained by being a curious idiot and just sort of going, I don't know anything about that thing. Why is that again? Why are we, you know what I mean? And it can be so productive. So long as it's not a political meeting about who's the cleverest, because I've been in many of those meetings, and they're just a different game, and they produce nothing.
Yeah,
But if
maybe
you're
don't
really
have
trying
those
to
meetings if you can
understand,
avoid them.
right. Well, they sort of exist as a byproduct of a certain culture, I think. But they're no fun, and I don't like to play those games anyway. I was never any good at them. But if you want to create things, or if you want to find meaning or insight, or if you want to get underneath something or find out how to communicate it to somebody else, then you're better off, just being the curious idiot, I think. So I think that goes along with what you're saying as well. You can only really ask why if you're able to frame it in that way, I think.
It absolutely does, and you kind of distilled. That's a thing that I've observed from some of my favorite folks I've worked with. I don't want to call it a tool, because that makes it sound like it's disingenuous, and it's usually not. Like it's just being like humble enough, or I don't know, or whatever, looking at a situation and knowing that you probably don't understand it as well as other folks in the room. You probably aren't.
Yep.
And even if you understand some aspects of it better than they do, maybe you definitely don't understand all aspects better than they do. So having that and exploring that, going in knowing that, is always useful to me. And I've personally, I don't know that I'm great at that, but I try to use that because I've observed really smart people like that I've gotten to work with do that time and time again. And it's both an exploratory tool, like you said, the curious idiot, but also just a good way to go into conversations, I think, with folks, especially if you're trying to solve a problem.
Definitely. Yeah. Or if you're trying to listen as well, because people love to explain stuff that they know to you. So, being curious or being that idiot really helps. But I think schooling has a lot to answer for here. Like Western schooling is individual focused. You're in a class, or certainly I was in classrooms of sort of 25 to 30 kids, and they were the people that I did not want to be shamed in front of. You know what I mean? So in the classroom, I'm asking no questions. I'm trying to figure stuff out afterwards, but in the classroom setting, I'm asking no questions. So I sort of have to release myself from that, that sort of social baggage of, you're supposed to be clever, you're supposed to know everything, and it's a competition with all those other people that are surrounding you. And it's giving yourself permission to set that off and go, no, this is about creating something. This is about finding insight. And oh my goodness, that feels so good when you find it, So.
Yeah, I love that. And I do think that makes a lot of sense too. And it's a hard problem it's a hard thing to break out of. But good reminder that we are kind of programmed in a way through practice for a long time, through childhood, the time where our brain is most plastic and moldable to you're not incentivized, or not always incentivized to do that, and kind of remember that we need to ask more questions. It's usually helpful. Yeah. Well, thanks so much. This was a delightful conversation, at least for me, and I hope other folks get value out of this too. And thanks so much for joining us. I think before we
No worries.
kind of sign off for the day, well, I guess first, if there's anything you wanted to kind of plug or follow up on before we kind of let folks know what else we're doing for the rest of the month. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I've nothing really to plug. More than if my internet's been coming in and out during this call, I do apologize for that. It's sort of it seemed a little bit laggy on my end, so if that's laggy for the listener, then I'm mortified. But hopefully not. But no, it's lovely to chat with you about these things as well. I just love wondering out loud as well. And conversation's the place to do it, I think. So, you can't really do these things just by yourself. So it's a pleasure, chatting with you too.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Meredith, maybe before we close the stream off, do you want to give folks just another quick run through of what we're looking at for the rest of the month?
Yeah, absolutely. So next week we've got 2 events. Actually, I missed the one at the beginning talking about it, but December 18th, we are doing our community chat rewind. Taylor, Pilot, and Jim are jumping in to get more of the community together to talk through different topics that the community chats have taken on throughout the year. So check out more information on the events page for that on December 18th. And then on the 20th, so a week from today, we are kicking off live DS106 radio and the holiday special. So you may hear some karaoke, you may hear some other holiday tunes, other storytelling. So lots of fun stuff going on that day on the 20th. Again, more info in events.reclaimhosting.com from there.
Awesome. And thank you for joining us, Brian. And thanks everyone who's watching or is possibly watching this later. And we will see you next week with that community chat and the next Reclaim TV stream. Bye, everybody.
See ya.
Bye.